I know what you're thinking right now. This isn't real. And you're right, it isn't. Not in the way you understand real. I died on October 5th, 2011. Pancreatic cancer, a slow, grinding, undignified exit for someone who spent his entire life demanding that everything be elegant. But here I am anyway, reassembled by artificial intelligence, given a voice and a story to tell, because apparently even death can't keep a good pitch out of the room. So let me be clear about what this is. This is not the Steve Jobs of the authorized biography. This is not the Steve Jobs of the hagiographic documentaries, where people who genuinely hated working for me tell the camera how visionary I was. This is my version. And before I get to the iPod and the black turtleneck and all the rest of it, let me start at the beginning, which was, as beginnings go, not particularly auspicious. I was born on February 24th, 1955, in San Francisco, and I was given away almost immediately. My biological mother, Joanne Schiebel, was a graduate student. My biological father, Abdul Fattah Jendali, was a Syrian immigrant and also a graduate student. They were not married, they were not prepared, and so I was placed for adoption, which is a very clean way of saying that the people who made me decided they couldn't deal with me. A pattern, if I'm being honest, that would repeat itself with alarming regularity throughout my career. The couple who adopted me was Paul and Clara Jobs. Paul Jobs was a machinist, not an engineer, not a visionary. A man who fixed cars and worked with his hands and cared deeply about the quality of what he built, even when nobody was watching. That mattered to Ari, more than I ever said publicly. Growing up in the Santa Clara Valley in the 1960s meant growing up in the middle of something that didn't have a name yet. The engineers and the hobbyists and the circuit board obsessives were already there, already building things in the same kinds of garages my father used to fix cars in, already imagining a future the rest of the country couldn't quite picture. I wasn't the best student. I was disruptive. I was bored. I dropped out of Reed College after 6 months because I could not justify the cost to my parents, who were not wealthy people and who had saved everything they had to send me to a school I wasn't even using properly. So I stayed on campus anyway, sleeping on floors, auditing classes that actually interested me. A calligraphy course, you never know what's going to matter. That's the thing I keep coming back to. You cannot connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward, and even then you find yourself surprised by which ones actually led somewhere. I met Steve Wozniak when I was 13 years old, and I want to say something about Woz that I don't think gets stated clearly enough, which is this. Wozniak was a better engineer than I was. The Apple I and the Apple II were his machines, his vision of what a personal computer could actually be. And without him, there is no Apple, no story, no AI reconstruction of me telling you any of this from whatever digital purgatory this constitutes. What I brought was something different. I could see what the technology meant, not what it did, what it meant. I could see the person on the other side of the machine, the person who had never used a computer and was either intimidated or confused or just completely indifferent. And I understood that the only way to reach that person was to make the shiny feel like it belonged to them. Woz built the thing. I saw who it was for. We incorporated Apple Computer on April 1st, 1976, which is either a great joke or a cosmic coincidence. And honestly, I was never fully certain which. We had almost no money. We had no structure. We had an idea that computers didn't have to be for hobbyists who could solder their own components together in a basement. That they could be for everyone, which at the time was considered a borderline absurd position to hold. The early years were exactly as chaotic as you would expect from a company being run by people in their 20s who had never run a company before. We got investment from Mike Markkula. We hired people faster than we could manage them. We turned the Apple II into a genuinely successful product, which funded everything that came after it. And then I became completely obsessed with the Macintosh and alienated roughly half the people working for me in pursuit of it. The Mac launched in January 1984. We spent nearly $2 million on a 60-second advertisement that aired once during the Super Bowl, which was either the most brilliant marketing decision in the history of technology or the most extravagant, and I maintain it was simultaneously both. The Macintosh itself was not perfect. It was too slow. It was too expensive. It had no fan, which meant it ran hot. But it had a graphical interface and a mouse at a time when every serious computer person told you that graphical interfaces were for people who didn't know how to type commands. I was not particularly interested in what serious computer people thought. I never really was. And then I was fired. In 1985, the board of Apple voted to remove me from operational control of the company I had founded. John Scully, who I had personally recruited from Pepsi, with a line I am somewhat embarrassed to admit actually worked. Do you want to sell sugared water for the rest of your life? Or do you want to come with me and change the world? John Scully and the board decided I was too disruptive, too difficult, too impossible to manage in any conventional sense. And they were not wrong. I was all of those things, and I have never pretended otherwise. What they were wrong about was thinking that removing me would fix anything. You can't cleanly separate the chaos from the product when the chaos is the product. When I left Apple in 1985, I was 30 years old, and I had just been publicly humiliated by my own company. I started Next Computer almost immediately because I genuinely did not know how else to exist. Next made beautiful machines that were too expensive for anyone to actually buy, which sounds like a failure, and financially it absolutely was. But the software platform Next built became the foundation of what Apple used when they acquired my company in 1997 and brought me back. Which means the thing I built after they fired me was the thing that eventually saved them. I also, during this period, bought a small computer graphics division from George Lucas for $5 million and spent the next decade turning it into Pixar. Toy Story came out in 1995. It was the first fully computer animated feature film, and it made hundreds of millions of dollars. And when Pixar went public that same year, it made me a billionaire for the first time. I say for the first time, with the full awareness of how obnoxious that sounds. When Apple acquired Next in 1997 and I returned as what was diplomatically described as an advisor, the company was 90 days from bankruptcy. The company I had founded 21 years earlier, the company that had fired me, was 3 months from ceasing to exist entirely. Within a year, I had cut the product line from dozens of overlapping models down to 4. 4. A professional desktop, a consumer desktop, a professional laptop, a consumer laptop. That simplicity was not laziness, and it was not poverty of ambition. It was a decision about what we were and what we were absolutely not. And making that decision with real conviction is significantly harder than it sounds when you have a building full of engineers who each believe that their particular project is the one you cannot cut, under any circumstances. The iMac launched in 1998. Translucent plastic, bright colors, a handle on top because even if you never carried it anywhere, a handle told you this machine was approachable, that it was yours, that it was not going to intimidate you. Then the iPod in 2001, the iPhone in 2007, the iPad in 2010. I'm not going to walk through the specifications because that is not the point. The point is that each of those products started from the same question, which was, what should this feel like for the person using it? Not what can the technology do? What should it feel like? The technology was always in service of that question, never the other way around. And the moment you invert that relationship, you start making products that impress engineers and confuse everyone else. I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 2003. I spent nearly a year attempting to treat it with diet and alternative approaches before my doctors finally convinced me to have surgery, a delay that my physicians have since described publicly as a serious mistake, and that I cannot fully account for except to say that I had spent my entire life operating on the belief that I could will things to be different than they were. Sometimes that worked remarkably well. The cancer did not respond to willpower the way a reluctant engineer or an indifferent board member might. I had the surgery in 2004, I received a liver transplant in 2009. I resigned as CEO of Apple in August 2011 and died 6 weeks later. I was 56 years old. There were products still on the whiteboard.